president of Red Hawk.
Yes.
And she's also developed a new system, and it's called Growth Networking Strategies, and it's for engaging and attracting ideal clients.
Yep.
So,
Great.
thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming.
Happy to be here today, guys. Can you hear me okay? I'll try to talk as loud. We got a little bit going on. So today we're going to talk about what your ROE is. So we've heard a lot about ROIs. I come from the financial world too. But today it's about ROE. Anybody know what an ROE is? Your return on your energy. So you go to these events like today, and of course this is an awesome event, so they're going to get lots of return on their energy. But you're taking time away from your busy schedule. You've made a financial investment, but you actually drove the car over here, and you're putting energy into being in an event. So what is your payoff when you're coming to things like that? So we're going to take a few minutes and talk about it. I also want you to think about what Eric just covered, and that is memorable. Just like the ads were memorable, are you memorable? But are you memorable in a good way? How many times have you said a person's name and they go, oh, I know that guy? And what you want them to say is like, oh, I know that guy, right? So how are we memorable? One of my favorite people, if you don't know about Joe Girard, you need to Google him. He was called the Beast in Detroit. So before the internet, before he had any technology, he sold 6 cars per day for 30 years. And those were not fleet sales. Okay? So think about that. No technology. And you know how he did it? He had a team that would sit there and he would feed them newspaper articles that he would clip out, and he would say, send them a wedding, thank you, or coming in and shopping for their car, happy birthday, Merry Christmas, congratulations. That's all he did for 30 years. And guess what? He was the guy. So if you don't know him, he's actually in the Guinness World Book Record for the most car sales. So if he can do it without technology, and Marketers Anonymous in this group and everybody, we've got lots of technology. Imagine what we can do together. This is what I want to share with you, though. And I redid my slides this morning when I woke up, because one of the things that I think is seriously missed is understanding the pain. When we were in a group like this today, for example, but thinking like a much larger group, you don't know sometimes when you're meeting new people, you don't know what point they're coming from. And I think that's seriously misunderstood. I know when I founded the Red Hawk 3 years ago, I took everybody at face value that when they told me that their business was successful or that they were doing okay, right? Again, I'm getting a lot of head nods, right? Or that, no, I really don't need any help right now, or I don't know how you can help me, right? And I took them at face value. What I have since realized, working with a lot of entrepreneurial, transformational coaches and different people, is that there's a real pain out there with people that are either starting their own businesses or they work as a W-2 employee and they have been put in a position that they're not comfortable with. When you are networking with someone, if you can find out what that pain is with them and you can push that bruise and you can relate to them, is this making sense to you all? So like, for example, you can say, like Paul, I understand, pick up my friend Paul. So Paul, I understand that you recently purchased this company, so you're now in charge of Dale Carnegie. I understand this must be this and this challenge might be that. So I try to relate with him and understand, and I may not have his pain right, or he may say, absolutely, Elizabeth, and then I can follow it up with saying, well, how may I be of assistance to you? But when you take everybody at their face value, you're not going to network well, because people aren't going to tell you the truth. We all want to show up and we all want to act like everything's fine in our worlds. Is that making sense? So start thinking about the pain factor, because your perception is not what the reality is in the room. And if you can find out what that is, you are going to magnify your business sales, I promise you. Because you're going to become the person that's memorable in a positive way that they're going to remember. And have you all heard this before? You have 7 seconds to make a great first impression. 7 seconds. And I didn't say good impression, I'm talking about a great impression. So when you show up at events, which we're going to talk about, and you're not ready, like maybe your mind's not there, the traffic was this or that, or you're distracted and everything, you've blown it. And it could be that your ideal client's right in front of you, or it could be that your best referral that you're going to find out for the next 3 years is standing in front of you. But you blew it because you had 7 seconds and you came across not making eye contact or not actually acting like you cared about the person that's in front of you. And guess what? If they had a bad day too, and you act that way, it's amplified because then they're thinking, oh, everything's wrong today. I'm getting a lot of head nods on this one. So I coined this expression. I love it when you network effectively, and that's why I'm calling it growth networking, because if you do it right, you can turn strangers into connections, connections into relationships, and it could be business or it can be personal. And then those relationships can turn into clients if you need them to be. Or it might be you're turning them into a referral source. Or if you're volunteering and you're philanthropic, it might be that you need them to be sponsors. You need them to be donors for your missions that you're working on, right? Right? Or it could be like Marketers Anonymous here. You need them to become members of this group. So it's not always about the client on there. But the important part is you need to start thinking about how can you connect in a way that's centered about them. And it's really hard when if you're working for a company and they have sales quotas and they have things that objectives that, and they're like, what'd you get at the event when you went back? And if your answer is, oh, I got a stack of cards, well, as we say in the South, did the dog hunt? So yeah, just because they brought you back the cards doesn't mean it's the right thing. You may have said, I want a goose, and the dog brought back a duck, okay? So getting cards is not an objective, and that gets confused, right? Right? Follow me? So the other thing I want to point out to you too is you're trying to connect with someone at a deeper level, but also who are you overlooking? I have seen this happen so much in the last few years when in my sphere of influence, I've heard this story over and over, and if you haven't heard somebody say this to you, it's because they're not being honest with you. So go back to the original thing we talked about is what is the pain? So one of the ladies who's a beauty consultant, she said to me, and she's very successful with what she's doing, but she says, you cannot believe how many people overlook her to even be in her sphere of influence. They don't even give her the time, particularly men. And they're like, oh, I don't need any of that. So she's like, do you have a wife? Do you have a mother? Right? So she's trying to relate to them. So they dismiss her. So she tells me a story last month, and she says, you know, all these men have overlooked me, Elizabeth. I would like you to help me figure out how to better network. And then when I found out a conversation, a contractor that did not overlook her, she introduced the general Class A contractor to an apartment building complex. He is now building 16 places for that because this beauty consultant introduced a contractor. So and then guess what? And then when that was announced publicly, the other people in the room that didn't take this woman seriously, they went, we had no idea that you knew people. So kind of think too, who are you overlooking? Are they standing right there in front of you? It could be somebody that maybe's 80 years old and retired. It could be a 13-year-old person that has input for you because they know guys. You know, they're probably going to school with somebody. So when you look at somebody, try to figure out what their fit is. Not everybody's a client. As I mentioned, sometimes they're a sponsor. They're a donor for something you're working with. Sometimes they're just going to be your friend. That's why I added social on here. Sometimes they're going to become your best referral sources. Some of my best referral sources, we don't do any business together, but they just like me and I like them, and we figure out how we're going to find business for each other, and we hunt for them. You know, like you guys, I'm on the hunt for Digital Array right now. So prospecting, you know, you got to know who your ideal client is. If you don't know who your ideal client is, because someone said in the room to me today, they're like, you know, I'm not sure who I'm servicing, you know, what I'm really doing. So you have to know in clear language when somebody says to you, Bob, how can I do to help you? Bob needs to say, Elizabeth, I'm looking for a client that's like this. This is the parameters that I need. Great. Now when I'm out there, I'm thinking Bob's ideal client in there. But someone may also just be a networking buddy. How many times do y'all go to something and you're thinking, darn, I wish I had somebody to drive to Norfolk with me late tonight, right? You know, or I'd really like to go to Newport News to go to that cool event these guys are inventing, but it's a long drive. I'd like somebody to be in the car with me, right? Networking buddies are powerful. They can also work the room. You can tag team. You can do twice as fast. Because if you do that, then we have got Danja, and Danja can say, oh, I want you to introduce you over here to Sally. Well, I didn't get to make it to Sally, but she can drag me across the room quicker. So think about, right? Think about people as to what that fit is, instead of everybody always approaches everybody like you're trying to think about, are they going to buy from me, right? Because we all know, based on what we just saw with the ad, that that's not working. This is the winning combo. I love this slide. So on the left, it talks about our basic marketing and sales, and we all know we're trying to, we have our list. That's our CRM, right? We got our list, we got our target, we're finding them, we're acquiring them into a customer, right? And then we're managing them. What happens on the left-hand side is usually where everything stops. Do you all hear me? That's where everything usually stops. And then what happens with the sales funnel? Then we start it over again. If you do it right, and you're out there working and influence things, and you're helping other people who are helping you in turn, and you're figuring this out, and they like you, because people do business, and I'm going to say this slow, with who you know, like, and trust, but then they have to remember you in a great way. So it's more than just know, like, and trust. They have to remember you in a great way. If you do that, then the whole right-hand side of the slide is what happens, because then you're retaining the client, and then you can upsell to them. You can circle back to them and say, hey, you know what? I'm just rolling this out. I think this would be a great fit for you. Or how you liked this when I helped you with your SEO. Maybe I can help you with this over here, right? Upsell. You remember Burger King? And would you like fries with that? You can get to the upsell. But you're not going to do that if they're not going to be a retained customer and coming back. But the most beautiful thing is on the far right here where it says they're going to refer. A happy person's going to refer. I just took pictures of my lawn service who just cleaned up my whole yard and everything, and I'm going to do a post like crazy for him, right? If you're happy, you tell everybody. So this, have you ever heard this quote before? Because I love this by Priestley. I'm so sure if you can see it. But the more we elaborate on our communications, it seems like the less that we actually communicate. And the reason why I put that up there is because these are all of our methods, and these are relationship marketing tools that we're all using. But if you're using the tools, and then people still don't understand what you're saying. So for example, I could stand up here, and most of my words wouldn't matter as much as how 38% is my tone, how I'm coming across with you. Like if I stood here and I just talked to you like this, and you just, I could say the most fascinating, memorable things in the world, right? But guess what? 55% is in your body language. So think about when you met somebody. Were they engaging? Were they happy? Did they act like they wanted you to be in the room? Right? Isn't it a wonderful thing? And you know what? We all go back to being kids. Remember when you walked into a room and at the lunchroom and that people were like, oh, hey! You felt like a rock star. In fact, that happened the other night to me. I walked into a marketing event and then everybody's waving to me and I'm like, oh, great, my friends are here, right? Right? So your body language carries so much more than actually your words. And I know we like to do a lot of things on social media. That's why I'm putting this in here. Because we text, we tweet, or put stuff in written form. But it's not counting as much as actually you picking up the phone and having a conversation or leaving a voicemail. Okay? Newsletters, I put this in here because I was surprised. I do a weekly newsletter, and I was shocked that people that I never heard from like saying, hey, that's great. So, but when I would bump into them, they go, yeah, Elizabeth, I get your newsletter. I really appreciate you sending it. I was like, oh. But people don't always let you know. So just because your statistics don't look like, yeah, and I'm getting another big nod. So just because your statistics don't show that what you're producing out there is actually being received, guess what it does? It's warming them up for you. So when they see you, they're like, oh, I remember. Oh, yeah, I remember. And, of course, like a name like Duncan-Hawker and Red Hawk, I'm kind of fortunate that I've got a hook there, right? But they remember it, and they remember it in a favorable way. So if you're doing newsletters, make sure it's something that they want to actually hear. And I wanted to share with you, I'm actually using a personality tool. Does anybody use, I know we've got Dale Carnegie uses some personality tools. Does any, and okay, and one of the...
I'm an extrovert, go figure.
Excellent. Well, assessment tools are so important. It's one of the things I teach in the class because if you show up with the same style to everybody that you meet in a room and you can't morph any of it and you can't read somebody, and you're right, extroverts versus introverts, it's really hard, but it's way beyond that. It's way beyond that. It's you have people that are so rigid that, for example, if you're late at a meeting, you will never get that deal. And if you don't understand that ahead of time, you're screwed. And I will tell you that right, and you will never know what happened to you. Versus I had somebody that quit a board because somebody talked mean to me at the board. Because she's a nurturer. So there's a personality assessment thing that I work with people on, and it's 82% close rate is what your potential is to get somebody to. And the difference between keeping your same style and morphing to what somebody else's style is, it goes from 16% to 82% for a close rate. So there's a huge delta there. So if you think it's okay, and I've heard people tell me before in the last few years here, they go, I'm going to show up how I'm going to show up. And they just need to take me as I am. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. However, guess what? How successful is your close rate? Because then how much do people remember you in a great way? Remember, because this is all about being remembered in a great way. Okay? And about your return on your energy. Am I speaking loud enough? I feel like I'm trying to talk over them. Okay. Yeah.
Louder would be better.
Trying to be louder. Okay.
The lunch crowd out there.
So this is a real quick quiz for you. You don't have to answer it, but answer it in your head. So how approachable are you to everyone? We talked about overlooking people. Do you size up a room and you flock to people that look like you? Do you stay away from people that perhaps aren't your demographics? That's not making you approachable to everyone. And we talked about there's all sorts of different people that can reflect and introduce you to people. How relatable are you? And I mean that. How relatable are you? Do you think that you talk a good game? Have you stood in front of a mirror and practiced anything? Do you know how your language is? Do you know how your body is? Do you even know what you're saying if it's making sense? You may not be relatable. So this all goes back to how you're showing up. I've seen so many people show up into the communities all over the Hampton Roads cities, and then it's down in North Carolina, and too I work, and sometimes they just show up straight taking. There's no giving, there's no awareness check, and when they do that, you're not doing business with them, and you already know that, and they have no clue, but then they're going to start following up with you, right? Because they're usually good, takers are good at following up, right? Right, sometimes. So remember, I want you to think about that in your head. Remember, next time you're at something like this, was I memorable in a great way, and was I prepared to talk to the people I'm at? Because it's all about getting more yeses, right? And yes is not as in that, yeah, I'll buy from you, but yes is in, I'd love to meet with you. I'd love to see you again. I will open your email, right? Because that goes into, if you don't know about this, you have to ask yourself, is this a better face-to-face or is it better compose and send? Because I know a lot of us, particularly introverts, love to sit down and compose and send because that's the easy way to do it. There's a lot of times you should never, ever, 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 ever send emails, especially to certain types of people. There's a lot of times you should just pick up the phone, or you should say, I would really like to see you in person for a few minutes. Or put yourself in the environment where you're going to bump into them. The biggest reason people leave us from our companies is because perceived indifference. Think about your favorite restaurant that you went to. If they don't recognize you and you go in there every single week and you're like, really? I order the same thing every week and the owner acts like he's never seen you. It's perceived indifference. Particularly if something goes wrong with your meal, right? I'm sure it doesn't happen here. I want you to also think about your last big purchase. What was the big purchase somebody made?
New computer.
New computer. A car, right? It may even be an air conditioning system. That's $8,000, right? I mean, there's a lot of big purchases. A roof, $15,000, right? When was the last big purchase that you had? Did they send you a gift card thanking you for doing that when you told somebody about it? Did they call you? Did the car dealership, yeah, see, we got some people did the car dealership even acknowledge that you had a referral source behind them? Car dealerships just amaze me because they so treat people as one and dones, and it's killing me. I actually went down to Raleigh to buy my car. It's the little turquoise thing out there. And I asked the guy, I said, what are you going to do with me afterwards, right? After you sell this car to me? Because I already told him I was buying it, right? And he goes, well, we're going to send you a survey. And I go, well, and what else? You know, and that was, well, we're hoping you'll give us a 10. I said, you got my 10. It's, but what are you going to do? What relationship are you having with him? He goes, no. And I said, do you know how many people are going to ask me about this turquoise race car? And how many people are going to want to come in? And since then, true story, I've probably had 50 people stop me, pull over, take pictures, ask me where I got the car. I was like, I could have got a referral base for that thing. But in their minds, I was like, nope, one and done. one and done. But anyhow, they became a client, by the way, so I wasn't done with them there. You know that. So I'm a little tenacious, so for those that know me. So when you don't follow up with people and you don't have a plan and you don't research and you don't want to connect with them in the right way, guess what? They're not going to recommend you. And when they don't recommend you, I love this slide. It's a leaky bucket. And then we showed that slide where you have to start over again. So your sales funnel's like this bucket. If it doesn't have holes in it, it's awesome, because you can continue to just have more and more leads come out of it. But when you keep messing it up, and I'm not saying y'all do, but if you know people that do that, or we have opportunity to get better, this is what happens to us with the leaky bucket. Has anybody ever heard this statistic before? So the National Sales Marketing Association says that if you follow up with people, your closure rate can go up. We got some nods. The closure rate goes up to 80%. Well, guess what? If it goes up to 80%, it's because in the middle of the slide that they made 5 to 12 different touches. And remember we talked about that it's emailing, it's texting, it's phone calling, but you're not going to get it from straight sales funnel. You have to actually do some what we talked about face-to-face and showing up, right? Okay? Instead of compose and send. So I want y'all to think about how do you become more memorable with what you're doing. How are we doing on time? Okay?
Couple minutes.
Okay. We got 12 more minutes?
No, a couple.
Oh, couple. I was going to say that's a lot. So, because I want you to think about with networking with a purpose. Like today. Now, I know some of y'all came here, because some of y'all are connected to me. Some of y'all are connected to the group. But think about what the purpose is. And I loved the gentleman who has the violin business. He actually had a purpose. He came here and he says, look, I'm working on my marketing. I'm figuring out what I'm going to do. I need exposure. He came here determined with a purpose. And our brains are already circling, going, how can we help recommend? How can we help him, right? So you got to know your why in your business. If you don't understand, if you can't explain your why and why you're expanding things and why you're pivoting and why you're taking things into the direction you're at, or why you're working at the bank or why you're working at this industry, nobody's going to work with you. The big thing that bugs me, though, is the name game. When you talk to somebody and then somebody says, oh, I'm sorry, what was your name again? I'm terrible with names. You know what you've just said to them? I don't remember you. Are you still talking? Are you still here? Okay. Participate. Try to remember their name. Even if you can't, but try. Really, seriously, it's a skill you can learn. That's lame when you keep going, oh, I'm just lousy with names. Because people's feelings get hurt. Introductions, if you do not know how to properly introduce somebody, go online and learn that. There's a technique. It's actually senior level, lower level, certain handshakes. Ladies, you do need to stand up. And men, you need to shake ladies. There's things you need to know. If you don't know that, there's a whole book on proper introductions. It will blow what you're doing if you're not doing it right. Remember to smile. I was working with somebody this week, lovely person, and she stood there the entire time. And then she says, yeah, I know. People always comment on my face. I'm thinking, then fix it, right? Right? It's so simple. But everything else about her looked amazing, right? But I was thinking, how am I going to refer this when she's going to go out there and she's going to show up that face? And I don't call that. There's a name for that, and I don't call that. So etiquette with your call to action, your CTA. There is proper etiquette closure. I know we're running tight, but I can work with somebody on that if you need some more information. I do want to tell you about Frog, though. That's my gift to you today. So when you are in an event and you just feel like you got nothing, okay, and this happened to someone I was working with. In fact, person was introduced that came to the group today. Frog was a technique that I taught someone to use, and I said, when you just get dry, try Frog. Frog stands for family, recreation, occupation, or goals. He tried occupation, he got nowhere. It was like, okay, yeah, oh, I did that too. Yeah, we worked together and everything. The person pivoted and then switched to goals because I had prepared the person and I said, we're going to Scotland. Find out who has gone to Scotland. And because of that, my new friend, Bob Granata, is sitting in the office, in the audience here today. So, and all of that came about because that happened. We actually went to Tattoo. We moved our trip up 3 weeks earlier. So because of Frog. So Frog is a powerful thing. So get off of, well, what do you do? Start asking them about their family. Are you from here? Are you local? Do you have kids? Recreation, do you like to ski? I noticed you said you're going to Colorado. It will make you memorable in that great way. Cleaners and movers story, I wanted to share this with you. So follow up. I've run into 2 different people in the last 2 months. I asked both of them, I said, I need to hire you. Crickets. You ever had that happen? I saw them again, and it triggered them. It was like, oh yeah, I was supposed to follow up with you. I gave them one more chance. Great. Still need the chandeliers clean, blah, 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 blah. Crickets. Okay, since then, I moved on. I hired 2 people to do that. So that's $1,000 worth of business that people could have picked up from me. And I was there, and I could have recommended them, right? But I can't recommend them now, because why would I recommend somebody that doesn't follow up, right? So show your gratitude for everything that you're doing. And then this is powerful. If you want to get to know somebody and you're not sure and you're a little bit on their chicken list, meaning that you're afraid of how you're going to be perceived, do some research and have some really good questions ready to ask them. Because people will judge you by your questions that you're asking them, not so much the answers. And because they'll be intrigued. They'll go, nobody's ever asked that for me before, or you checked in on me, right? It's a powerful way to be memorable. Appreciation always wins over self-promotion. Have y'all heard that term? It wins every single time. So 20% of your content should be about promoting yourself. 80% should be about following up. Hey, you mentioned your kids had the flu last week. How are they doing now? Or hey, did you get that trip to Scotland? How was that, right? So, and an example that I love to do too, and I know there's several people that do this, is actually send heartfelt cards. And I mean real cards. In this world of technology, how many people got Christmas cards? Wasn't it awesome when you it was like being a kid again and you're opening up a Christmas card. I just got a Happy New Year card last night and I was like, oh my gosh, right? Heartfelt cards, Happy Veterans Day cards. That's a really good one. They get forgotten a lot. That's a really good one to do. You do it from the heart, not because it's cheesy. Or a phone call or a luncheon bite. You have to be authentic. So I want to summarize just a few tips to you. If you're not showing up real, don't go. Like if you don't believe in your product, you don't believe in yourself, you don't believe in what you're trying to talk to somebody, please don't show up. Just don't even go to the event. Go sit at the bar, right? Right? Be authentic, and smile, be happy. Like Eric said, with the ads, have a sense of humor. One day I walked in and in fact, it was with you, Paul. I loved that moment. It's like I'm meeting him and talking to him again, and all of my cards went on the floor. Instead of having a panic attack, I go, well, I must obviously want to give you all my cards, right? Have a sense of humor about when things don't go right. Yeah, it was like, what are you going to do, right? So not crying over it. Know your research. Make sure that you are acknowledging that meeting new people is uncomfortable such time. So coming into this group with all of the techies, I got to tell you at the beginning, I felt a little bit uncomfortable. And there's sometimes you all are talking to me about stuff and I see you all going, oh, I don't know what she's talking about, right? We all feel uncomfortable. It's okay. But that's how we're going to bond and help each other. So remember, that goes back to speaking the other person's language, and it continues once you know what they're about a little bit more. You know if time is important to them, like being on time, right? You know if being kind is important. When you understand the perspective they're coming from, that's you speaking their language. And I'm sure you've all heard Maya Angelou with her quote, because people are going to forget what you did for them, which just breaks your heart, because you kill yourself and you do nice things. They're going to forget what you did, they're going to forget what you said, but they're never ever, like we just talked about the Christmas cards, when you opened up that card, they're not going to forget how you made them feel at that moment, right? So if I can help you in any way, I'm happy to give a discussion and take a few minutes and meet with anybody. But growth networking is something. You got business growth, you got personal growth, you got spiritual growth. There's so much growth in the world. So just because you may not be at the place that you think that you're at, it's an awesome time to change and get better at what you're doing. So thank you. Appreciate y'all having me today.